Welcome to the Live Full, Work Fun podcast. This is the show to encourage you to live your life to the fullest and do fun work that fuels your lifestyle. Hi, I'm your host, Gayla Scrivener. Every week, you'll be introduced to amazing guests, useful resources, and inspirational stories. You'll discover opportunities and perspectives to shape your version of living full and working fun. Well, hi there, and welcome to the show. If this is your first time here, I am so glad for you joining for the very first time. Thanks for checking out the show. Now, if you're returning, welcome back. It's always so great to have you here. Are you a part of the Live Full, Work Fun community yet? If not, be sure to hop over to Facebook and join the Live Full, Work Fun Facebook group. Well, today I have John Hulen joining me. I was first introduced to John through my good friend, Dr. Michelle Deering, who hosts Mother-Daughter Connections podcast. She was a guest on John's podcast, Relationships and Revenue, and I wanted to catch the episode. So by listening to Michelle's appearance on John's show, that got me doing a bit of binge listening. John's show is geared toward a male audience, but I found it very helpful as a woman, and I really enjoy it. Work and family relationships are a big part of the success we have in our lives. Work and home life are very much intertwined. When there's trouble at home, it affects your work and vice versa. Now, I reached out to John and asked him to be on the show today so that we could take a little bit of a deeper dive into discussing the relationship aspect of living full. With nearly 30 years' experience coaching in private and nonprofit sectors, John helps individuals and organizations clarify who they are, why they are here, and where they should invest their time and energy. John has a passion for leading people to see the importance of navigating relationships personally and professionally, and how mastery over this area can impact every aspect of life and success. As a 20-year business owner and successful entrepreneur, John specializes in working with business owners, executive leaders, managers, and team members, challenging them to think and act differently in order to achieve different results. John offers one-to-one business coaching, group coaching, and various speaking and podcast opportunities. Programs can be customized to various industries and individual or team need. John, I am so glad you're here. I've been listening to your podcast quite a bit lately. I was introduced to it through a friend of mine who you interviewed. I listened to her show, and then I was listening to some back episodes, so it's been great. And so I am so excited to finally meet you and to have you here on my show.
Well, thank you very much. I am honored to be here and just ready to get into it and see what we can do to help folks.
In the intro, I already gave a brief bio of what you do, but why don't you share a little something that led you to becoming a certified life and business coach and a speaker?
A lot of my background when it comes to those two things are in the nonprofit world, or to be more specific, the church world. And so that's where I got my chops in all that stuff. And so I have been public/professional speaking for nearly 30 years now, and coaching on some level for about 25. So I've been doing it for a long, long time. As far as the certification goes, there are some certain things that I'm certified in doing, and those certifications came within the last 5 to 7 years. I'm making a comment about coaching as a whole right now, so it's for some people it's controversial. It's not to me. Certifications are not the be-all, end-all. They're just not. You have to find someone that's a fit for you, and you're a fit for them. And so if you find someone who is further along the path than you are and you have a great connection, then that's probably the person you need to be working with, whether they have any sort of special certification or not.
So you started in church, but you've been an entrepreneur for a long time. So have you always done coaching, speaking? Where did you have other businesses?
Oh, yeah, I have other businesses. I've been in business for myself since late 2001.
I'm fascinated by the entrepreneurial journey because I left a corporate job after 20 years. I mean, my whole adult life. And then I jumped into becoming an entrepreneur, had no clue what I was doing. Were you working for someone else or have a job and then shift into entrepreneur, or you were always an entrepreneur?
No, not always. I was not always an entrepreneur. The church side of me was part of it. So the term that's used often is bivocational. So I had more than one vocation. And I actually liked doing it that way. So I had a corporate gig for a while, and then I left that and I went to a .com, if that tells you anything. That was when that was first happening. I went to a .com, and it was a crazy mess. You know, as quickly as they were hiring people, they were firing people because they thought that's what you were supposed to do. Oh my gosh, yes, it happened a ton. You know, that was a job I got fired from. I was out of work for, I don't know, a month or so, and I did, a few little things here and there. Caught on with a place where I was doing some IT consulting. I had a 6-month contract. That contract ran out, and when it ran out, my recruiter told me for the next one, and that's when the .com when the IT market just kind of bottomed out. This was, late 2000, early 2001, right in that range. She told me I was one of 700 applicants for this one job. It was very unlikely I was going to get it, and I need to find something else. So I tried to get other things, but nothing was happening. I mean, just nobody was hiring. My then father-in-law was building a building to move one of his businesses into, and he said, in a way that only he could say, "You got nothing else going on. Why don't you come clean my building? I've got 2 bids to clean it. If you come $1 under the cheapest one, it's yours." That's how I started. So I started a cleaning company, which I still own.
Awesome. And so you've owned that for quite some time.
Mm-hmm. I have.
Were there stumbling blocks at the beginning?
Yeah, there was a lot. Let's see. I had a hard enough time figuring out how to do the actual business. Then there was the behind the scenes, actually running the business part that I didn't have any clue how to do.
Me too.
And so I was fortunate. My father-in-law, he taught me more about what it meant to run a business than anybody I've ever met. I learned more from him than I did from any professor I ever had. Now, I didn't learn everything from him, but I learned a lot of things about the running of a business, not the actual business I was doing. I would never tell anybody to do it how I did it. I would never suggest that. Unless you happen to be independently wealthy, which most entrepreneurs are not. My suggestion would be stick with your day job and then start something on the side. And if you're having a hard time figuring that out, now I'm going to say some things that I'm pretty sure you're familiar with, but this is kind of a litmus test that I give people to try and help them figure out what it is that they want to do, okay? And typically your answer to all 3 questions is going to be the same. And it's this: what makes you mad, what breaks your heart, and what problem do you solve? So when you know that helps provide clarity so that you know what direction to head in. The other thing that's extremely helpful is when you're figuring out what you want to do, and this certainly helped me, is to figure out, who do I want to reach? That's really important. And please don't tell me everybody. That's not going to work. You're not going to reach everybody, so don't even try. The shotgun approach doesn't work. You're going to be poor, and you're not going to be able to eat. So don't do that. Figure out exactly who you need to be reaching. And when you do a great job of doing that, then you can expand and reach out further.
I love your podcast, Relationships and Revenue. You talk about the importance of relationships at home and how that impacts work. And really, your podcast is geared toward men, but I love it because I get a different perspective.
Thing. Let me kind of explain where the podcast even came from, because maybe that'll help provide some clarity. We'll use that. I guess that'll be our keyword for today, clarity, for folks not only in understanding the podcast and where it comes from, but where I'm going with it in the future. I am a single again dad, which means I'm divorced. I've been divorced for 11 and a half plus years. And one of the things that I knew when my divorce was coming was that I needed to do some work on me, because clearly there were some things I did wrong in the marriage. I knew exactly what they were, and I knew what I needed to do to get better, and so I got some help with that. I did therapy and other kinds of things I did to try and work. I read tons, and which I continue to do, read tons and tons of books, just to learn, to get better, ask questions of other people who I think are doing things better than I was doing it. It's like, how are you doing this? Why is this working? What are you doing that's not working? I mean, just all kinds of, did a very deep dive into me and to try and improve me and get me better. Once I did that, once I got through the pain, And that's a key ingredient in all of this. It's not pretending that the pain wasn't there. I wasn't trying to bypass it. I wasn't trying to substitute something else in place of the pain. I did the hard work. I worked through it so I could get to the other side. Because when you do that, no matter what it is, your clarity becomes crystal clear. You begin to see things not only in a new light, but you begin to see the challenges that you had in your life. You can see them in other people's lives, and you can see them way before they fall off the cliff because you've been down that road. You know it. As I like to tell people who my target audience is for my podcast, it's my formerly stuck self. That's who it is, because I want to help as many men as I can not end up where I am. My divorce was completely preventable, as I think most are. Quite frankly, it's because as men, we're terrible at relationships. Terrible. And one of the main reasons we're so terrible is because we are not encouraged to be good at them. We're not. When we're little boys, we hear phrases like, boys don't cry. That's not what a man does. Well, to be truthful, the people who say that, I think, don't have a clear clue what masculinity has anything to do with. But that's a discussion for another time. So I guess the point I'm trying to make with all of this is to say, I did the work. I got through it. I realized who I needed to reach, and I also realized that my pain was not for myself. I realized my pain was actually for other people, and I was doing a disservice to those other people if I did not do something with it, if I didn't try to help in some way. So that's what I'm trying to do with the podcast. The interesting thing is that over half of my audience is women.
Can you expound on a little bit about how our relationships at home affect work?
Happy to do that. Now, I will say, first of all, let's take the whole pandemic, forcing people to be at home and work from home. Let's just leave that to the side for now. But there is something to talk about related to that, but that not for this particular question. So if that had never occurred, a more traditional job where you leave the home, you're working for someone else, and you come home. Your ability to be able to leave things at work, much easier than if you're an entrepreneur. Much, much easier. Because when you're an entrepreneur, typically, not always, but typically, you've started the business from ground zero, meaning you didn't buy another business or you didn't buy a franchise where everything's kind of figured out for you. So you're figuring things out along the way, not unlike it is when you have your very first child. Never been a parent before, have no idea what you're doing, kind of on-the-job training. Same thing when it comes to starting a business for the first time. So this business is your baby, and it is very difficult to let go of that and put that down, even when you really need to be paying attention to things at home. So how you do with relationships at home has very much impacts what you do at business, in business. Again, whether that is you own your own, or you're working for somebody else. Because I can tell you, if things are falling apart at home, they're going to fall apart at work. Now, it might not be immediate, but it's going to happen because the common denominator between those two is you. Because you're still going to work and you're still going home and you're bringing those issues with you. And I think the thing that would help people the most is to teach them some skills to be able to work through the things that are happening at home. Because let me tell you about an informal study that I did. I've talked with a lot of HR folks of some rather large firms, and I asked them some very pointed questions. Now, they would not give me the information I wanted, but they would tell me what I wanted to because they couldn't legally give it to me. So I want to know, on average, how many working days a year are they losing, and you're translating that into dollars. I mean, we're talking billions of dollars of lost work time because people are saying they're sick when they're not, because they have stuff going on at home and it's gotten so bad they have to take time off work to deal with it. And I liken it, I grew up in a car family, so that's kind of where this analogy comes from. I liken it to this. In your car, after you drive it for a little while, you know pretty much how it's supposed to sound. Even someone who doesn't know anything about cars or how to work on them, you know the sounds of your car. So when it starts to make a sound that's different than what you're used to, typically is an indication of something not going right. The sooner you get on that, the less expensive the repair is going to be. The same thing is true in our relationships. As soon as we start to notice something not going right, the sooner we get on it, the quicker it's going to get repaired. That scar can get in place and make it more solid, and we can move forward. The longer we wait, the worse it is. Sometimes we wait too long and it's not repairable, but that's more of a worst case scenario.
So there's seasons in life, like work is really busy and it has to consume you. Are there any tips on how to kind of manage that and keep home life going in a positive manner when you just can't be present for a period of time?
Well, here's some things that I have done that I've found helpful. First of all, again, I'm speaking from a male perspective. I can't speak from a female perspective because I don't know it. So I know the male perspective, and this is what I recommend to guys all the time. I said, first of all, you need to be doing things for your significant other on a regular basis. And it's not about how much money you spend. It's what's behind it that's important. And so if you're married, bring flowers for no reason, just because. Because then that's special. Bringing flowers on Valentine's Day is not particularly special. Unless that's something that you have determined ahead of time, that's what you like to do, that's what the other person likes. I mean, conversations need to happen related to that, but if it's something that's not expected, it makes it more special. Things like that. Leaving little notes. I guess I really should back up here for just a minute. Something that's critically important, and I don't care if you're a man or woman, knowing your significant other's love languages, oh my gosh, so critically important. Unfortunately, what most people do is they tend to give love how they like to receive love, and if you happen to be an exact match for your partner, perfect. Most people are not. So it's knowing what that partner likes, or what that, if you're talking about your children, what that child likes, how he or she likes to receive love. I have a thing where I am a gift giver. I am. I'm a detail-oriented person, so I listen to people a lot. I pay attention to the things that they say, and sometimes the things they don't say. You know, it would not be uncommon for me to hear somebody one time, I'm in a group setting, and they happen to mention they're like, Minute Maid orange juice. 3 years later, I know this person's going to be at an event I'm hosting, and I make sure it's a breakfast, and there's Minute Maid orange juice, and they also don't like pulp, so I make sure it's pulp-free Minute Maid orange juice. You know, and the person comes up to me later and comments, I go to these things all the time, and there is always pulp in the orange juice. Thank you so much for doing that. It's like, oh, well, I remembered you saying, you know, back whenever we were together that you like Minute Maid orange juice that had no pulp in it. It's like, you did? It's like, yeah. So paying attention to things is important. But that happens to be something that I like to do. Now, not everybody can appreciate that, so that's why learning those things about someone else is important, so you can build that sort of rapport. Some people, it's acts of service, that's their thing. So they feel loved when you do things for them. So it could be the writing of the notes. It could be putting gas in somebody's car on a regular basis, or going to grab a coffee first thing in the morning, whatever it happens to be. So doing those kinds of things can be really helpful. Here's another one that's super, super important. Again, man or woman, doesn't matter. When you get home and you're with everybody, put the phone down.
Bless you.
Put it away. Close the computer. There has to be time for family. There has to be. You have to do it. I realize some people just, for whatever reason, can't or won't do this, but I recommend sitting down together to eat. I know it can be hard, but you can make it work. And this is what I mean. If your kids are older and they're into activities, guess what? You can show up at their activity, bring food, and you can all still sit together and eat. And the kid may, right, the kid can eat and bolt. But the point is, you did it together. Another thing that's really important, and again, I'm speaking to the guys here, and that is, you got to have date night, date day, whatever it is, on a regular basis, whatever the two of you determine that it is. If it's once a week, if it's twice a week, once a month, whatever it is, you've predetermined when that's going to be, and that is something that's in your calendar that the rest of your schedule is built around. This is Rock of Gibraltar stuff. It doesn't get moved. For those of you who are old enough to know what Franklin Covey planners are, this is stuff you write in pen versus pencil. It stays on the calendar. Now, the funny thing is, I get feedback from men sometimes because they say, Well, John, you don't understand, because when we were dating, I took her out on all these elaborate dates. We did all these things. And now that it's the two of us together, our money's pooled, she's going to know how much money I'm spending, and she's not going to want me to spend that much money. And I'm like, whoa, 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 hold on. When you say that to me, that means you assume she's stupid and doesn't know how much you spent. She's not stupid. She knows how much you spent. I said, however, if you're really worried about how much it costs, I'll give you 2 date ideas right now. One costs $1, the other one's free. Here they are. First one is you escort her to the car, which is key. That's something, unfortunately, most men don't do anymore. They don't escort their significant other to the car, open the car door, help the person in, shut the door, and repeat the process. Opening doors, that kind of thing, the common courtesy sort of thing. Yeah. As a side note, I started making my son do that when he was young, like 10, for his sisters. I made him do it for his sisters. He hated it. Every single time he hated it. Today, he does it. He does it for every female that gets into his car. He opens the door. He shuts the door. When they get somewhere, once they learn his pattern, they wait for him to get out and open the door. And I taught my girls the same thing. You wait to be let into a vehicle. You wait to be let out. And if that person that you're with isn't going to let you in, you call Dad. I will get you. And then you will never be out with that person again. But again, that's an aside. So when the dates. So the one, escort the person into the car, go to McDonald's, get a soft serve cone, and share the cone. There's your $1 date. Your free one is you go for a leisurely, not workout, a leisurely walk in your neighborhood. That's not going to cost you anything. But the key on the dates is we're not talking about business. We're not talking about the kids. We're not talking about the bills. We're not talking about all the stuff that has to be done. You're asking her about her hopes and her dreams. You're sharing the same kinds of things. We're talking about where do we want to be as a couple, a month, 6 months, a year, 5, 10 years from now. That's the kind of stuff you're talking about. You're building the relationship. It is critically important. And I tell guys often, when you first start doing this, because you've never done it, it will feel weird. And you won't like it. But it's like anything else. It's a skill set that you can learn. And every skill set you've ever done in your life, you were terrible at first, but you got better over time. You can do this.
I think we as women can give more clues to our significant other.
One of the things that ruins relationships, and I don't care what kind of relationship it is, assumptions. Assumptions ruin relationships. When it comes to those interpersonal relationships between men and women, one of the things that is, it's hard for men. For those of you ladies who are listening, if you don't already know this, let me tell you this now. Stop with the hints. We don't get them. We're never going to get them. You all are fantastic at giving them. I know you can understand them. We can't. It's not in us. So if you want something, say it. Now, how you say it does make a difference, but saying it is important. Because I can't be held responsible for doing something that you never told me about. I can't read your mind.
Love that you say that. On our anniversary, I'll get up. Some years I don't want to necessarily celebrate. And some years it's like, oh, you know what? Our anniversary, because it comes up on us and it's like, hey, our anniversary's coming up. And then 2 days later, crap, our anniversary was 2 days ago. So we both do that. He's better at dates than I am. We'll sit around. It's like, oh, you know what? I think I want to go out. We're going to have steak for our dinner. And afterwards, we're going to go over and I think it's time for a new ring. Why don't you know, let's just pick out a ring, nothing expensive, just kind of the fun type of stuff. And he's like, all right, we've got a plan and I know exactly what I'm doing and you're picking whatever out. And that works for us. But I appreciate you saying that because I had a hunch a long time ago that you guys can't read our minds. So I might as well just say it and say specifically like, hey, I love it when you ask me to dance, not just sit and brood And why isn't he asking me to dance?
He should just know,
You know,
right?
yeah, he should just know, but he doesn't.
No, we don't. We don't know. We're not being mean about it. It's if trust me, there are times I wish I could just figure that out. Now there are some things I can figure out just because I've lived enough years and had enough experience that I can kind of sense some things and figure some things out, but I can't figure everything out. Uh, I would much rather over communicate than under communicate because I did enough of the under communicating before. It kind of boils down to leadership more than anything. I mean, if you don't mind me quoting John Maxwell, everything rises and falls on leadership. It does. And I don't care where it is. If your organization happens to be your family, you happen to have a multi-billion-dollar organization, you have this small business that you started recently, the size doesn't matter. Leadership is leadership, and you have to learn how to be able to lead well. You have to start with yourself. You got to be able to lead yourself well, leading those closest to you well. And then there's most people in terms of leadership, they think of leading down. That's actually very little of leadership. Most leadership is peer and actually leading up, which is an amazing skill. If you don't have it, oh my goodness, it's something you have to get.
Is this part of your F6 formula, or have you gone into that a
it
little
has
bit?
it has some to do with that. Yes, it certainly does. The F6 formula are the 6 areas of a man's life he tends to struggle in, especially after he gets married. And those happen to be, so go with me on the F motif here for just a minute, my alliteration, if you will. They are faith, fashion, fitness, food, friendship, and fun. Those 6 areas. Not necessarily in that order, but they happen to be in alphabetical order just because it made more sense to me to do it that way. The naming of it actually comes from somewhere. Now, you happen to be in the Midwest, like I am in the Midwest, and so we are familiar with tornadoes. Not everybody is. Tornadoes are ranked, they have an F ranking. It's F1 through F5. F1 through F5, the higher the number, the more the destruction. There actually is a relatively new category. There is an F6. They don't measure it in terms of destruction. They measure it in terms of devastation. It is very rare, but when an F6 tornado comes through, you don't see the typical kinds of scenes where there's like these houses smashed and stuff spread all over the place. No, F6 tornadoes remove. So they don't just take houses, they take foundations. They pull trees up completely by the roots. They flatten hills. So however wide that particular tornado happens to be, there's like a path, and there is nothing left when it's done. That is exactly what happens to a man when those 6 areas get out of whack. Exactly the same thing, the same kind of devastation.
Well, that's kind of dire. How do you pay attention to those?
Well, I'm using the dire terms for a reason, and honestly, more than anything else, it's to get the attention of men. Because most men, unless warning bells are going off, unless there's a fire, unless something like that's going on, we think the relationship is okay. We think everything's fine, unless it's completely falling apart. And when it gets to that point, it's pretty much beyond repair. That's kind of what happened to me. So I know it. I know it well. But that's why I want to try and help men start to recognize some of these things and begin to work on some of these things to get better. So I'll pick on one for an example. Fashion. I realize it's a little more challenging to go into a group of people now, but when you used to be able to do that with more frequency, I could go into a group of people and I could tell you which men were married and which men were single based solely on what they were wearing. It's not hard to tell once you know what to look for. Now, there are a few things that threw me off, but I have about 95% accuracy with that, of being able to figure that out. And that's because most men, this is kind of what happens to men. There's something within us. We know how to pursue. It is a part of our DNA. We know how to do it. But I can't explain it in a tangible way. I can just kind of tell you what it feels like. Once we get her, i.e. the wedding day, there's like a switch in the back of our brain that turns off and the pursuit stops. I have her. I don't need to continue to pursue. I did it. And that's why so many men push so strongly into careers and or hobbies, because there's never an end to those. The example I use when it comes to hobbies is golf. Now, that is not my hobby because it really doesn't interest me at all, but for some men, they love it. But there's always a new glove, a new hat, a new club, a new place to play. There's always something new. And if you're talking about a career, there's always a new ladder to climb. There's always more money to make. There's not an end to those things. And what I tell guys is, look, we need to take some of that energy and we need to pull that back and we need to reinvest it into your relationship, because that's really where it belongs. It doesn't belong in these areas. I'm not telling men not to pursue those things. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is just not as much. Let's take some of that and reinvest it over here. So teaching men how to pursue. Nobody taught me how to do that. How do I continue to pursue her after the wedding day? Nobody teaches that. But we need to know how. That's where this whole idea of the date night, date day on a regular basis comes from. What I tell guys is, look, when I was married, if we had date night, she took care of everything. She figured out what we were going to do, where we were going to go, how we were going to get there, and made sure the kids were taken care of. Most of the time, she even picked out what she wanted me to wear, but pretty much I had to show up. That was about it. And I tell men, look, those days are over. That's done. You now own that. You are taking that off her plate. And it's like, this is no longer your responsibility. This is my responsibility. My job now is to make sure that we have where we're going, how we're getting there, and making sure the children are, notice this, properly taken care of. Because I know what men will do if they're not told that. They will essentially plop the children down in front of the television, turn on some streaming service, and make sure some sort of assortment of what they call food, which is really crap, is sitting in front of the kids, and then they feel like they're good to go. Like, no, that's not proper. That's not proper taking care of the children. So that's your job, to do all that. Her job is to show up and look beautiful. That's it. That is her only job.
I just have loved this conversation, John, because it took me a long time to really understand the intertwine. If home is good, work can be good, but it's all intertwined. And because of your experience with your divorce, that got you to where you are on how you help other men save their relationships and be prosperous at work and prosperous at home. Now, is there something like a resource or a book that really made a significance during your transition?
Oh, goodness. Oh, how long is your show? I'm a big reader, so there are lots of books. It's interesting. What's weird, you'll pardon me if I lean down to the side. I actually happen to have two of them right here that have been very significant and helpful to me. This is the first one. This is a book that I have given away over 100 times. I know I have. It's called The 7 Love Agreements. The subtitle is Decisions You Can Make on Your Own to Strengthen Your Marriage. So ideally, this book is great if both people read it together and they're working on the different areas together. But the great thing about it is it's actually designed if one partner is not interested in working on the relationship, but one is, it still will work. It still makes a difference. Yeah, it's by Dr. Douglas Weiss, W-E-I-S-S. Now, this next book you're probably familiar with, and you may wonder, how does this apply to relationships? But it's Atomic Habits by James Clear. It's a phenomenal book, and it's about creating new habits. And I have found that when it comes to getting better in the area of relationships, typically it goes back further. It starts with me. What are changes I need to make in me first in order for things to get better? I can't expect the other person to do all the work. It starts with me. I have to be willing to do some things to make me better. And when I do that, then I won't even have to say anything. The other person's going to notice the changes, and there is a greater likelihood that the person is either going to work on him or herself, or at least join me in the pursuit of this. And that works if you're talking about husband and wife relationships, if you're talking about parent-child, if you're talking about business owner, client, employer, employee. It doesn't matter the kind of relationships. It applies to all of them. Lastly, something else that I found helpful, and again, this may seem a little odd, it's another podcast that I never miss. It is a leadership podcast, It is the Craig Rochelle Leadership Podcast. It comes out once a month. It's the first Thursday of every month. And the reason that I like it, besides the fact that it has fabulous information about leadership and teamwork, both of which apply to relationships, because teams don't exist without people, and people exist in relationships, they offer, or they send out, if you sign up for it, they send out an email a day or two prior to the episode coming out, which has all the show notes, but included in the show notes are questions at the end, discussion questions, so you could listen and or watch the episode as a team and then go through the questions as a team. It's fantastic. I love it. Now, for those of you who don't know who Craig Rochelle is, he happens to be the lead pastor of Life Church, which is based in Oklahoma City. It's actually the largest church in America, but they have like 37 locations in like 11 states. So they're big by being small. His paid staff is 750, 800 people, but the volunteer staff, tens of thousands. So somebody who can lead an organization that big is somebody I need to pay attention to. And if you listen to any of the episodes, very rarely does he mention his background or being a part of a church, because the stuff he talks about applies no matter what you do. So that's why I like it. That's why I pay attention to it.
I'm definitely going to have those links to those resources in the show notes. How can people follow you? What's the best way to stay in contact with you, John?
Well, I'll tell everybody where I'm at and how to get in touch with me. So pretty much all of them, I'm, ampersand, so at, not ampersand, but the at symbol, at John Hulen, Hulen. So you can find me on Instagram, I'm on Facebook, I'm on Twitter, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm also on Clubhouse, so you can find me there as well. Those are the best ways to get in touch with me. And if you send me a direct message, just to let you know, I am the one who replies to them. I don't have a team that does that. It is me. And if you send me one, I will reply.
Good deal. And talk about your podcast one last time. How do people subscribe?
Sure. Any place where you consume podcasts, you will find Relationships and Revenue. So it's the Relationships and Revenue podcast with John Hulen. That's me. There are solo episodes on there. You all heard me talk a little bit about the F6 formula. I go very in-depth into the F6 formula in there over several episodes. So I have one at the beginning where I go kind of in general and talk about each of them. And then I have separate episodes where I go in depth into each of them. But I also have, I guess you would call them partnering episodes where I bring in experts on those 6 areas to be able to help men in those with things like fashion and fitness and food and that sort of thing.
Well, I am so glad that you spent this much time with me, John, and thanks for being with me today.
Oh, I was honored to be here. Thank you so much for asking me to be here. If there's anything that I can do for you or your listeners, please just let me know.
Well, thanks for being here with me today. Whether you're a guy or a gal, be sure to check out John's Relationships and Revenue podcast. Links to the show, as well as the links to the resources he mentioned and his contact info, is right down there in the show notes. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I'd love for you to do me a favor. Please share this episode with at least one person you think might find it helpful. Just text them the link. Now let's continue this conversation. Hop over to Facebook and post what your biggest takeaway from today's show was in the Live Full, Work Fun Facebook group. Well, thanks again for listening. Until next time, have a fantastic week. Live full and work fun.